We have a very old set of statutory rules dating back to the 19th century that pin responsibility on candidates and agents to file an accurate return of their expenses after the election, one which shows them within the limit. If they don't, it's not an accurate return or it's a dishonest return, there are offences committed. We also have a policy of running short time limits for civil claims based on overspending or criminal prosecutions. Criminal time period is 1 year. So very often offences are committed, but they can't be prosecuted because nobody discovers until more than a year after the event that there's been a breach of the law. But on the face of it, if your report is right, these returns look like they're clearly wrong.
But there can be no action taken because the statute of limitations has expired.
Well, there can be no action taken for these very particular election law offences. We call them corrupt and illegal practices.
What is the law when it comes to what happens to people who might have been responsible for this?
I mean, if you asked the ordinary voter, the ordinary person in the street, they would say, well, that's all very well. But if people with a lot of money to spend on elections are orchestrating big campaigns, spending a lot of money on them, accommodation, administration expenses, and so on and so forth, and knowing that the returns their candidate and agents are putting in aren't accurate, but they have really spent more than that, the law would be an ass, wouldn't it, if it couldn't find a means of pursuing those responsible for that, at the very least investigating them. You make a representation to a returning officer. If it's wrong accidentally or because you don't know the law, there's no problem. But if it's deliberately wrong, and deliberately wrong repeatedly, and there are a group of people who know what they're doing and know why they're doing it, to make some sort of gain for their party at the election, to spend more than they're allowed to without being caught out, I would say that's worthy of an investigation by the police, and I think most people would.
But it sounds to me as if you're saying, well, I'm sorry, but I doubt if anything will be done this time.
Look, I'm very sceptical about this, I'm afraid. I don't think our legislation works. I don't think it's worked for years. I think there's been overspending without people being caught for many years. And I think we need to bring the legislation up to date. But in that gap that exists at the moment, there shouldn't be any problem if there has been dishonesty by agreement in finding criminal offences to investigate.
But I mean, to say the least, there is UKIP who will feel that they were, to some extent, done out of some of the action as a result of this, or they could argue that they might have been. And then, of course, there are going to be voters who are going to say, you're telling me this happens all the time.
People say, look, it's a grey area. I don't know if I'm the candidate or the agent, whether this, and this was spent. I don't know if this was lawful or not lawful. I relied on so-and-so. So-and says I relied on so-and-so. It's very difficult for a prosecuting authority, for the police.
Is there any legal power in this country which would say, I'm sorry, the law's an ass, we're going to fix it?
No, but European authorities have said for many years now that our archaic election law is in need of updating, that it's open to voting fraud, and the expenses and the expenditure regime is completely unregulated. So we're being watched from outside by the EU and the Council of Europe, and there have been some very serious criticisms about our law, and we can't go on hiding from them forever.